Welcome to the T-roh Show. Transmitting truth one week at a time.
Welcome to the 42nd broadcast of the T-roh Show. It's your host, Keith. Got Stu.
Afternoon.
And we have a lot to talk about today, folks, in light of the T-roh Show Special Edition number 5. One thing we did want to address was there was a couple of questions people had on the 650,000 deaths that we were talking about. A lot of times when things are being spoken, you don't really tell everybody, what you're thinking at the time. So, yes, we had, okay, let's go into detail. Since there were some people, I'm talking mainly military here, guys. This military is bringing this up because, according to them, it's the Constitution's the end all, the be all, and mainly because they benefit from it. And they, as NCOs and officers, they have a career and they want their retirement. So they're obviously, they're always going to, be biased no matter what they do. They started complaining, well, you didn't have your numbers right. 650,000 was quite high, and if you have that, we're going to question everything else, all your other facts. If you haven't listened to the T-roh Show Special Edition number 5, you need to go listen to that so you understand what I'm talking about here. What they didn't count were all the men, all the women and children, the British that died in that war, because they had families too. The French, the Germans, the Dutch, and all the Indians, all the black revolutionaries, African Americans at that time, all those people. So 650,000 may be a small exaggeration, a little bit, maybe, but if you add all that in, it might be pretty close.
Yeah, it certainly wasn't 25,000.
Right. Or 50,000, because he came up with 25,000. There were 17,000 that died here and this and all that sort of. So he's arguing, he's arguing numbers. But what he's doing,
really, exactly, it's not really the point.
Right. He completely ignores that the people that signed it weren't even delegates at the time.
Yeah, like that has no meaning, carries no weight whatsoever. It's really about the bloodshed.
Right. That's what he comes out with. However, folks, whenever, especially when I'm talking, I've always got something in my back pocket that you don't know about when I'm dealing with people that are supremacists. I'm not talking about white supremacists or anything like that. When I'm dealing with a supremacist mentality, I've always got something in my back pocket. That's I never go to an argument or anything without knowing everything about that argument that I could possibly know, and always having something new to bring out that nobody ever thought of. These kinds of things. It's just how I operate. Now, I could get caught on that. I'm not saying that I'm supreme, and I'm not being an egomaniac or anything else. It's just how I am. So when this guy's arguing 50,000, there was only 50,000, which was just free white males. Let's not count anybody else, right? It's just the free white males there. They didn't discuss what really happened in that time. I went back and did a little research on some other parts of this that was going on. While the Articles of Confederation, while they had an American government, okay, they called it an American national government. The United States was never an American national government, by the way. They said that the English cut off all of their ports. They didn't want them to have anything to do with any of their contracts with the Dutch, East India Trading Company, It was lucrative contracts. They weren't giving them anything. It's not that it was weak, guys. That's not what they were after. It's not the argument that the Articles of Confederation was weak and wasn't able to collect collect anything for its debts or anything like that. That's not what it was about.
Cheap excuses.
Yeah, they're all cheap excuses. And they neglect to tell you that the convention was held in secret, by the way. It was a secret crew. That's why a lot of them really weren't delegates at the time, except the stoolies. They had some stoolies there. So what was happening was, and what the goal was to remove the sovereignty of the states. Because you have to understand, in their minds, and talk about the English and the Dutch and all them, their companies, in their minds, those states were not to be independent states. It never meant to be independent. Those belonged to the Dutch and the monarchs, because they're the ones that set up the colonies. That's in their heads. So this is what happened based on what I was reading. They had ports, they cut off all the ports. They wouldn't give them any trade. The Treaty of Paris had nothing to do with them, with the American national government, by the way. It wasn't with under the Articles of Confederation at all. And their goal, the people were sitting there just like you would now today, okay? The people were sitting there and they were expecting to see an Articles of Confederation that was amended. That's what they were all expecting. What they found or got is that a constitution that took all state sovereignty. Just ripped it right out from underneath them. So let's talk about semantics here. Let's talk about numbers of 50,000 free white males that were killed or lost their lives in the Revolutionary War. Let's talk about men, women, and children. Let's talk about the British. Let's talk about all that. And let's forget the fact that when that Constitution came through, it committed genocide against those states by ripping all of their sovereignty away. It took their independent national identity of each state that was formed together in a union. That still is happening today. None of the states that are there are independent. A lot of their sovereignty is gone. When you have that, that's genocide on paper. That's what I say by there's always something in my back pocket, because if you want to talk about numbers on a claim, okay, we'll talk about numbers. Let's talk about 3 million, because that was the population of the country at the time. Not counting the Indians, not counting the African Americans, not counting anybody else, just white people. There were 3 million at the time. Their national sovereignty was gone. That's genocide on paper. The Indian nationality was gone. That's genocide on paper. That's still happening today under the same document that everybody worships today. And all the rest of the folks in between there. Okay, so you're never going to have your independence whatsoever as long as, I'm talking about the states and the states of the Union, they're never going to have their independence. And this may sound bad, and it's like I'm against it. I'm not against a constitution. I'm against genocide. And I'm against people that foolishly support something when they don't see all of the facts. They don't recognize what's really going on with them.
Well, I think we do a fair job at that. I don't think that we and I would agree with you. I certainly don't promote this stuff to belittle or attempt to dissolve or otherwise destroy the Constitution, etc. We're shedding light on a subject that is rather obscure and gray and is rife with misinterpretations and misunderstandings, and therefore a lot of bad decisions are made by folks based on what they think is occurring, what they think the Constitution says, and what's really happening and what the Constitution really does say. And I think you're pretty fair at that, and I think the show itself is fair at that also. I mean, we can certainly hear comments from folks about it, but I think we do a pretty fair job of that. I don't think we're out to, constantly belittle it or anything like that.
Right. It just is what it is. It's just facts. You can't really say it's something else just because it's popular. You follow what I'm saying? I don't want to be the guy that just says it. Hey, we go for our Bill of Rights just because I'm going to get everybody to go, yay. That's not what it's. Everybody in the crowd's just going to agree automatically, and they're going to get cheers, and it makes you look good. Yeah, that's just fake, man. That's fake stuff.
Right. We're about offering a valid choice.
Exactly. So
we're not here to. We're here to recruit if the show comes across with that level of credibility, and I think it does, and our documentation support comes across with that level of credibility, and I think it does. That speaks for itself. But certainly the goal isn't to degrade, et cetera, the other side.
Well, let's go to this part right here. Okay, it claims to be the supreme law of the land. That's what it claims. So what were we actually dealing with? Let's go in and explore that a little bit, okay? We're dealing with an attitude of supremacy. That's what I mean by it. I'm not talking about white supremacy. I'm not talking about black supremacy. Okay, I'm talking about, it has nothing to do with race. It has to do with an attitude of supremacy, which is in a supremacist mind, okay, they always believe that they're better than everybody else. I'm greater than you, that type of thing. And they're always going to treat other people that way. And it's been that way for a long time. It's a supreme law of the land, supremacy, it's supreme, okay? Better than everyone else. When in fact, if you go in and look at it, you don't even have a president of the United States of America written in there. So how can that be supreme? See, that supremacy can be used against you. And that supremacy is very arrogant. And today, the states could actually charge Manhattan Island with genocide. That's what supremacy gets you. It's always arrogant and it's always blind. That's not a strong country. That's a stupid country. That's somebody who thinks they underestimate the people they're dealing with as far as enemies abroad. They're underestimating them. It blinds you because you don't see the truth. That you're wide open for a lawsuit, a big one. And the descendants of all those people that are still enforcing it today are just as guilty as the ones that put it in the first place. So to try to sell it, they had to put the word supreme in there, supremacist, it's supreme. Supreme law of the land. Well, you didn't have any delegates sign it. Then their thing was, it went back to the United States and Congress assembled, and they passed it on to the states and they all ratified it. absolutely not true, because that Congress was disbanded by force and they didn't do anything. It was the people that were involved with that Constitution that convened and called themselves the Confederation Congress. They lied because the goal was to take away the sovereignty of the states. Violation of the law of nations. Everybody knew it. Why do you think George Washington took that book out, The Law of Nations, and never returned it? Didn't want anybody else to read it. He was in trouble. He knew it. They all knew it. They were industrialists, lawyers, manufacturers, all the big rich boys, the supremacists that thought they were better than everybody else. And all it is that they're greedier than everyone else. That's all it means. And they use the stuff they own because their self-esteem was attached to what they owned.
Got to spread the empire.
Yeah. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to bring this down to a level that everyone can understand equality. That's what the government of the United States of America is all about. It's about equality. And it's about non-supremacy. Whether you're claiming to be supremacist or supreme over everyone else based on a race, a bloodline, who you are, blah, 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 doesn't matter. It's all still supremacy. And that's why you have a lot of that in this country, because that is what's in your Constitution. This is what you're taught every day. I'm better than you type attitude. Because of my skin color, or because of my bloodline, or, this is where we came from,
I've got a cliche phrase right at the tip of my tongue. American exceptionalism.
Yeah. They come up with that. And that's what we're trying to get people to understand, that if you're going to evolve into a greater understanding of the world, and you want to become a more advanced civilization, you have to stamp out supremacy. Islam, they're supremacists. That's all. They think they're better than everybody else. You have the monarchs. They think they're better than everybody else. There's a lot of that going on. The Dutch, they think they're better than everybody else. They're a supreme commander, great this and blah, blah, okay? That's what it is. But it really, they when they do that, they open themselves up to a lot of very simple liabilities. Because today, the very enforcement of that Constitution that stripped away their sovereignty, their independence, can be sued for stripping away the sovereignty and independence, and it's called genocide. Easy to win. It's a slam dunk case. So we're trying, okay, let's look at here's another evidence, or here's another example of supremacy that we're talking about, or supremacists. And not talking about race. Keep race out of this, because it really has nothing to do with race. It's an attitude. It's in every race of people, this supremacist thing. Okay, but what about the voting, Stu? Let's go to voting, all right?
Okay, yeah, sure. I've got a screen share too, so just stand by for a minute. So it should be showing up. We're at the U.S. Constitution, Article 2, Section 1, the executive power. We've covered this in previous shows. Mm-hmm. Vested in the President of the United States of America. Okay.
That doesn't exist, by the way, because it doesn't have an oath and affirmation to it. Go ahead.
Mm-hmm. Yep, and you can get more details in previous show. Note here, though, each state shall appoint in such a manner, this is this paragraph here, each state shall appoint in such manner as the legislature thereof may direct a number of electors equal to the number of senators, yada, yada, yada. Okay, and we slide down to the next paragraph. The electors shall meet in their respective states, vote by ballot. Where's the sentence? Here it is right here. The person having the greatest number, that was as a link. The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president. Right here, where my cursor is. I can't highlight it because it's a link.
Right, no problem.
The person having the greatest number of votes shall be the president. The votes, of course, tie in up here with the electors. Okay, so the first question you should be asking yourself is, where are the people in this? Where's the popular vote? It doesn't say anything about popular vote. It says the person with the greatest number of votes from the electors becomes the president. You see, here's electors.
Yeah. So you talk about the Electoral College.
The Electoral College, that's right. Okay. So even the Constitution, the voting component of the Constitution is, let's flip that around. The Constitution outlines a particular way that the president is voted in. You're told via news and schooling and common lore that it occurs a different way. But as you can see, each state shall appoint, and that's a big word right there too, Keith, appoint. So where's this Russian hacking narrative coming from? If these electors are appointed, they know who they are. That is, the political parties know who they are. For the most part, sure, there's going to be a change here and there, but for the most part, if you know who you're appointing, you know how they're going to vote. So where's the narrative of the Russian hacking coming in? How can that possibly occur?
Well, how many times has it happened? You had 6 times in history where the popular vote voted for one president, and the Electoral College electors, which all have an oath and affirmation, by the way.
Yep. Just
so you let you know, that's the ones that count. This is why we keep saying if you have an oath and affirmation, then your vote counts.
Mm-hmm.
You don't have an oath to it, it doesn't count. The popular vote is for one candidate, but the Electoral College overturns that, so that means your vote never counted in the first place.
Right. You're basically being, well, you can look at it several ways, but you're basically being misled into thinking that your vote counts. But if you think critically, why would a private entity that is owned by foreigners allow Billy Nebraska to vote as to who's going to run the company? That doesn't make any sense. Do you think IBM's going to do that? No, they're going to only allow shareholders to do that, not the general public.
Exactly.
Additionally, right here, you can't dispute that they're telling you, they're requiring you to understand the document, and they're going to mislead you. They're going to walk you through all kinds of bells and whistles and propaganda, because that's what they do. That's how they turn a buck. You see, that's how they turn a dollar. That's what their business plan actually is.
And that's what we call supremacy.
Mm-hmm.
We call that a form of supremacy and that's why it's a supremacist type document. It's meant to where only the appointed, and it sounds very official, like it's, like you have a popular vote, but you really don't. And then right after, like when Trump got in, all the Republican voters, okay, the guys that are part of the Republican Party or whatever, they all started claiming that they voted for that president. You didn't vote for anybody. It was the electors that voted for him, because if, in fact, Hillary got the popular vote, your vote didn't count in the first place. This is common sense.
Mm-hmm.
And now the fight is against the left and the right, is the right saying, we're not going to let them take our vote by nullifying the election. Well, you didn't have the vote to nullify an election because you never had an election. All you had was a computer screen with colors on it, blue and red. That was it. That's all you had. And then they say, well, they're supposed to do what the people vote for. The electors are supposed to vote the conscience of the people. Well, obviously that didn't happen, because there were 5 or 6 times in the history of this document where the electors did not vote the conscience of the people. And then they go, oh, those are isolated incidents, because you can't get it in your head that your states are supposed to be independent and you're supposed to have your vote, which you do not have. And when somebody tells you this, you're going to, because you were told this in high school, that you had the Bill of Rights and everything else, you don't have an oath to that document. Well, our Secretary of State has a real good way of explaining this. Notice that your electors do have an oath. They take an oath to that Constitution. That means that they're a part of it. We'll give you an example of how he explains it.
They're part of the club. I mean, look at it like it's a club, right? It's just a membership thing. So you've got a club. Am I in it? No, I'm not in it. But I could be if I did the necessary things and they accepted my application and yada, yada, yada. So now all of a sudden I'm in the club. So now I have the ability to do things that other club members do. That is, work the Wall Street, stock investments, catch pending legislation, and then be able to invest in Silicon Valley or in healthcare or whatever.
And you're protected by that Constitution from everybody else.
Right. Exactly. I mean, it says right here, look, a person holding an office of trust or profit under the United States. Right here.
Shall be appointed an elector. Yeah, okay. but no.
You can make money holding office. You're not serving the people.
Or profit. They're telling you. Yeah. Here, come on in, guys. Come on in. But you got to be invited, and that's the whole thing.
Yeah. So,
and we're not saying that the electors are dishonorable. We're not saying that. There's no accusation here. We're just talking about the facts of a supremacy situation, where the sovereignty of 48 states, actually 50 states, but the sovereignty of the 48 states has been stripped away. That's genocide. You can't take, in the law of nations, that's called genocide. You can't take the international character of a state and strip it away from them.
Yeah. I mean, here's another key sentence. But in choosing the president, the vote shall be taken by states, the representation from each state having one vote. So, you're talking about vote tally of perhaps 100, 125. Where does the Russian hacking come in?
I know, and all they have to really do is just go right to the electors and say, were you guys hacked by the Russians?
Exactly.
And if they go, no, because our vote actually went through and that's how I voted. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So the whole Russian thing, that is all a scam to make you believe that your vote counted. Because if it did count, then Hillary would be president if she got 3 million more votes.
Right. Now we're getting somewhere. Exactly.
But it didn't count. And if it didn't count, that's called a lie. It's very easy to figure out what a lie is when you're told one thing, but in reality, it's another way. What happens is another way. So we can take what happened. All right, we can take what happened and use that evidence against your word or what you're being told or what you believe, because you're in a belief system that makes you believe that your vote counts. When in reality, according to the facts, it didn't count at all.
Yeah, I mean, there's just nothing here about the people's vote. Nothing. It's all the electoral college. So that whole line of that whole drama that plays out during election night, although it can be exciting, it can be kind of fun, for those that can take it. They sit around and have a couple beers or whatever and see if their horse comes across the finish line. But the reality is, it's all show. It's a popularity contest when the real tallies are some 125 votes. And where does computer and Russian hacking come into play in that scenario?
I have no idea.
Particularly when basically who's voting for who, because you've appointed these guys, as it says up here. Each state shall appoint.
Right. The state is going to appoint, not the people.
Yep.
You get it? The state is going to appoint the electors, not the people.
Mm-hmm.
So, let's just get to another part of this, folks. Personally, okay, I would respect this. I would have, if they would have done, if it would have happened this way, I would absolutely respect everything about this country today, and I would serve it well. If the qualified, or the ones who were elected by the people, by the way, that was under the Articles of Confederation. They were elected by the people as delegates to send them over to the United States and Congress assembled. If those guys that were in there, all of them, all of the electors, or all of the delegates, I'm sorry, I think there were 74 of them at the time, would have gone to a convention, and they took the Articles of Confederation and they said, okay, this is what we're going to do. We're going to change this paragraph here. They made all the notes. They amended it. If they wanted to do a three branch type government, which was executive, legislative, and judicial, and they showed where they had delegates from each state and all that, and then they amended it to fit that narrative, and all the notes were there, and they all voted yes, I'd be all for it.
Right. We're not exactly, because we're not pointing out the Electoral College and the misleading component of the popular vote relative to the Electoral College. We're not pointing that out to disparage. We're pointing it out because there's people that actually believe that their vote counts, and they would be unhappy to find out otherwise. But truth is truth. We need to communicate these things. It's your choice. You don't have to let it affect you. We're not saying that it's a right or wrong type of way to elect somebody with electoral colleges. We're not saying that it's an invalid way. What we're saying is that that's the way it is, contrary to what's presented to you by mass media and high school and things like that.
Right, and if it was legitimate, or they, why do all that? Why go through this whole scenario of this? Say, folks, just sit back. We've got the electors going, and you can email your opinion to them, or you can send them a letter. Back in the day, you can send them a letter, send your opinion to them. I think this guy ought to be done. They'll take it into consideration, but they're going to vote the way they want anyway. They would see that wouldn't be very popular. Then they couldn't say, like I think Alex Jones comes out and says this a bunch of times. Well, we elected Donald Trump. We voted for Donald Trump, so therefore he's in. Well, that's all good and well, but really you didn't. You didn't vote for him at all.
Yeah, the electors voted him in. In theory, as best we can confirm, but. And that's fine. That's fine if you want to have a system set up that way. Again, we're not criticizing the system itself. We're just shedding light on it so that people can understand. My neighbors and the folks that are listening here that aren't part of the apparatus or part of the bloodline, they can understand what's really occurring. It's up to them to decide whether they can tolerate it or not, and make some decisions based on that.
Right. Exactly. So you have the national government here, okay, the government of the United States of America, that advocates for state independence, so that they can get their national character back, and all the people can start voting and have a say. All right. What's happening over on the other side of this coin is, let's just get to the truth. Let's get to the bottom line here. This is what really goes on. Hillary and Donald Trump are both distant cousins of George Washington. All of the presidents since that time have been distant cousins of George Washington. So your choice for president is narrowed down to who was ever related to George Washington. That's it. That's number one. That's an oligarchy. So you only had a choice of two candidates. Both of them were qualified because both of them were distant cousins of George Washington. That was the only reason why they qualified.
Right.
Both of them stunk to high heaven. Horrible.
Yeah, it's two sides of the same coin.
Exactly, because actually there was like 12
this year. You're going to vote tails next year. You know.
Yeah, you believe like they had 1,200 candidates last year. Okay, for president, and a lot of people didn't know that. There's like, I think it was 1,200 or something. It was in that area. Okay, don't quote me on it. You know, oh, you could have checked your facts. Blah blah blah. But it was around that narrative. That many people, you never heard any of those because they weren't related to George Washington. So you have an oligarchy that runs a private company, and they have placed their states. The oligarchy has placed their states under the White House in all of the independent states, and they run their societies. And nobody really gets a vote in the society, but when the only time you matter is when it comes tax time. That's when you're a citizen, right?
Yeah.
Any other time, you're not. You don't get any rights. You don't get anything. There's no. You can't be left alone. You can't make a lot of money unless you're in the club. You can't become that that multi-billionaire or multi-millionaire unless you're in the club. We all know that.
Yeah, they play a rigged game. You know, everywhere you turn, it's a rigged game. And
if it wasn't a rigged game, we wouldn't be sitting here on the t-roh show talking about it.
Right. No, that's exactly the point I was going to make. You know, from voting, from claiming that they're a government when they're actually a corporate entity, the whole thing is a rigged deck, and you can survive within it, right? We've covered the pledge. Remember the pledge a couple shows ago.
They treat their subjects very well.
Yeah,
they do. They treat the
survive
subjects very
within
well.
It, you know?
Yeah, and you live better than most kings did, because you hear that a lot. A lot of the subjects and even the poorest of people live better than most kings did back in the 1700s.
Yeah.
Okay. So you're treated very well, but don't get the idea that you have your freedom and independence, because that is a dangerous thing for you to do.
Yeah, you're on a
tightrope there.
Yeah, and you're on a rather large plantation, but there are fences, and you will run up against the fences. Don't think that it's just an endless horizon that you're free to roam. That's not the case. But they do give you substantial room, and as you said, they treat you pretty well. I think they're losing control, which is part of the police state being brought in and things like that.
They're going a little too far because now they're abusing them. They're abusing the subjects.
Yeah.
They're going a little bit too far, and they're also class separation, and the supremacy is going a little bit too far. And when they do, they always do. By the way, there's always a generation that makes it go too far. And when they do, they lose. That's what happens. So sorry to interrupt you, but I wanted to put that in there. That's usually what's going on today. It's not because you're going to get your country back or your constitution back, because it was never your constitution. If it was, it would have the people voting. Correct.
Right.
It was.
You're not going to be able to. We've said this before numerous times. Also, you're not going to be able to change it from within. As you can see, there's ways that it operates that most people aren't even cognizant of. So they go up against the apparatus. They're making incorrect arguments. They're placing emphasis in the wrong direction, et cetera, et cetera. You can't change it from within. So you're going to have to make a decision. And this ties us back into the education emphasis that we were talking about. You're going to have to make a decision at some point. Are you comfortable within that system, knowing it has some limitations, knowing it has some flaws, knowing it's based on, some misleading things, or are you not? And so now you have a alternative.
Right. It was to establish choice. That's what this government was all about. It was to establish choice. You have a choice now. And I was going to go back to what the our Secretary of State, how he explains this to the supremacists. Okay, he deals with a lot of supremacists. Some, they come up to him and say, hey, I hear you don't pay taxes. I hear you don't do this. Well, how long do you think you're going to get away with that? This kind of thing. Well, you're entitled to your beliefs. That's a supremacist. They use these tactics of you're entitled to your beliefs, as if what you think is just completely retarded. Okay.
Right.
And out of it's just crazy, crazy the way you think. So this is what he does. He tells him, he says, this is just a paraphrasing here. Can't get into the whole thing because I can't remember the whole thing, but just paraphrasing. He says, he was talking to this one individual, and this guy was a MP in the military police, and he wanted to be a police officer. So I don't know why he was talking to him now. I guess he was practicing on how he's going to deal with the so-called crazy ass people that need to have meds, right? Because that's what a supremacist does. They always go to the meds. You're crazy. You're this. You wear tinfoil hats, blah blah blah. These are their tactics because they're trying to break you down. They're trying to break down your self-esteem so that they can gain control over you, because that's what a supremacist does. The supremacist is all about control.
Yeah, they don't present any documentation. They just present labels, derogatory phrases, attempt to attack credibility. But they very rarely does that side offer up documentation support.
And they're definitely not going to ever agree with you. So don't ever expect them to. Okay.
Yeah.
That's when you're dealing with a supremacist. So what he tells him, he says, look, when you were in the military, you took an oath, right? And they said, yeah. He said, okay, when you took that oath, you were subject to UCMJ, which is Military Code of Law. And he said, yeah. He said, now, without that oath, were you subject to military UCMJ? And he said, no. He said, okay. He said, now, when you're a police officer, you take an oath, right? He goes, yeah. He says, that subjects you to all the laws, state laws, and everything else, right? Yes, it does. Okay. You're trying to enforce that on people that don't have oaths.
There you go. Exactly.
He said, that is where you guys violate the human rights of others. That's where you cross the line. That's where your supremacy goes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you mentioned taxes before, but you could also argue that part of the apparatus is designed to extract money based on, traffic tickets and, petty offenses of that nature, parking fines and, grass is too long and things like that. You're outside of their, you're really outside of their system, and yet,
you have no vote in anything. You can't say anything, but yet somebody holds you liable for something that you have nothing to do with. That's called slavery. Y'all understand that? You can't subject somebody but the supremacists will always think that he can or she can. Because it's women too. They're all the same. They'll do the same thing. Supremacy is not gender biased. It's in women and it's in men. All of them do the same exact thing. You cannot subject somebody that doesn't have a stake in it. Like we've said before, how many people know that they get that a lot of the commissioners, county commissioners, and a lot of the county employees who have an oath or are a citizen of that particular town, a literal citizen because they took an oath, they get a dividend check every year. They have a stake in it. So they're the ones responsible for the taxes. Nobody else has a stake in it. So this is what we're trying to stop, is the supremacy attitude. The same type of attitude that pissed off the revolutionaries when they were talking to the English. You call yourself subject to the crown. You should have this, and your loyalty should be blind and do everything, this kind of thing. That was the attitude that started the revolution. And it's the same attitude that starts everything when it comes to violence. Antifa believes they're greater than the conservative Republicans. The conservative Republicans think they're greater than the left. They bash the left all the, look how stupid they are, you suck. That's a supremacist attitude. It's supremacy. Supremacy is, let's get in a couple of windows in a hotel room and shoot 518 people. Why? Because you're better than they are. They deserve to die because that supremacist believes he's greater than them and that his life is worth more than theirs. Then you have these tragedies. Now they're going after the guns again. So who was behind it? Seriously, you can't figure that out? Who was behind all that? It wasn't some lone gunman. They pulled the lone gunman thing back in the 60s with Kennedy. It seemed to work then, so they figure they're going to work now. Same thing. They're just supremacists, folks. That's all you're dealing with. And supremacists are in every race of this world. There's always going to be somebody that thinks they're better than you. That's the whole high school thing. So-and-so thinks she's better than me, and so-and-so thinks he's better than him. And blah, blah, blah. It goes back and forth like this. This is the whole argument for 4 years.
Yeah, you could also make an argument that this supremacist outlook that you're talking about ties directly into secret societies. Isn't that part of the root of coming together as a secret society? To set yourself apart, to say, hey, we've got some knowledge that we're not going to share with others because we deserve it, they don't.
Right. It's the same thing with the with aliens or advanced technologies. Discs flying in the air. That's okay. So the military high ups know what's going on, but they're going to keep that knowledge because we're more supreme than you are.
You can't handle the truth.
Yeah, you can't handle what's going on. You'll just pass out. This kind of thing. When I look at it as, okay, well, what difference does it make right now? It's not going to make any difference because you're still going to have this supremacist problem. We have to worry about our problems. It's called sweep your own doorstep before you start sweeping others. And if we can fix the supremacy issue, which, by the way, I believe this government has done, because you wouldn't believe how well everybody gets along from all walks of life, from all parts of the country. We have our tiffs, we have our arguments and things like that. But in the end, we resolve those problems and we all still get along. There's a lot of us. And every time what we call a newbie comes in, takes their oath of the resident declaration, they go through the same issues. They've already had the guru education, so we got to get them to unlearn that and learn something new, or learn the way things actually really are. Let's put it that way. It's not really new. It's the way things are. So we have to do that. But we end up really liking them. They all become friends. They're really good people. Really good people.
Yeah. And I think part of that is particularly when people come to us desiring liberty, desiring what this government offers, not
right. They're not running from something or running
exactly.
to something.
Exactly. They come to us in pursuit of something, not on the run from something. And that makes a big difference. There's a lot of people that don't pan out, so to speak.
When they're running from something.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Because they're not really after freedom, independence, free thinking.
getting along with others and all that.
Yeah, I mean, here you're required to have a gun. You're required to think on your own. You're required to take responsibility. You're required to make decisions. You're required to educate yourself. It's not like we hide anything from you. We want you to know as much as we can possibly get you to know. We want you to become smarter than we are. That's independence, folks. It's that's why we have George Washington Carver on our $500 bill. He was born a slave. He freed himself through education. He became a scientist dealing with peanuts. Okay, and he became smarter than his captors. He became smarter than his supremacists that he was dealing with. And the thing is, it's like this government is actually looked upon as, especially by military folks, because you know how they are, and others, that we're trying to chime in on their scam, their con here. You just want our slaves. That's on the international level. So that they don't realize that, no, that's not what we're doing. We're here to establish choice, because choice is the most important thing that everybody has. You have a choice, and they think we're trying. That's how we're addressed most of the time. You're trying to chime in on our con here. No, we're not doing that at all, because that is always going to be there. It will always be there. There'll always be somebody trying to take advantage of other people they're less educated than them. Rather than educating them, they will take advantage of that and keep them ignorant. That's just the way it is in this world. Sadly, but it is. It's that way.
Yeah, and in fact, Catalonia is a perfect example that happened, yesterday and Sunday. There's for the folks that don't know, real quick, there's an independent province called Catalonia that exists, and they had a referendum on independence Sunday, a vote. Spain and the EU, the European,
the monarch there, by the way, it is Spain still has a monarch in charge. Just let everybody know if they didn't know that. But go ahead.
Yeah, and the European Unions, teamed up and politically interfered with these folks that have their own economy, their own language, their own government. Sent in troops. The troops bullied, shot people with rubber bullets. There's now clips that are coming out that there was, billy clubs were used and things like that, all in an attempt to repress this drive for self-determination, this drive for
natural human right is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's a natural human right that they were exercising.
Mm-hmm.
And it's
so
funny.
There are villains out there. That's I guess that's the point we're communicating. There are really villains out there. So the more you know, the better your education, the more efficiently you're going to be able to
see through the BS.
Yeah. Right.
You'll be able to see through the BS. I mean, I can sit there and tell you when they're lying every day of the week, because if you know the truth, you can't be lied to. They lie all the time. It's funny to watch to a certain extent. It becomes entertaining, but also sad at the same time. It's like, why are you lying to those people, man? Just stop doing that. Stop abusing them, Some of the greatest leaders in the world were dealt with non-supremacy. Okay, look at and I hate to use an example, but I'm going to use this example anyway. Look at Gandhi. He was one of the people, man, and he crippled the English Empire just by making his own clothes, and they processed their own salt. That was it. That's all he did, and crippled the English Empire. Why? The English Empire was supremacist. They're dumb. They limit their own knowledge. They limit their own everything. It blinds you. Supremacy always blinds you, and that's just a natural law. So when you start thinking you're greater and better than everybody else, you just blinded yourself, and your reign will be over. You ended your own reign. and you're going to blame everybody else, but you ended your own reign. Kind of explains Hillary, doesn't it? She thought she was the better and greater than everybody else, and I don't need to go out and you know, pander to the people or anything of that nature because you know, she's Hillary.
And the electors showed her.
Yeah. And you know, the higher they are, the harder they fall, right? Okay, so there's a couple of things I wanted to bring up. If the states want to completely understand what we're trying to tell them as far as supremacy is concerned, all of your statutes are based on supremacy. And I'll tell you why. You write them without the acknowledgement of intangible property. When you ignore intangible property in any act or law, you just made what they call a supremacist law. It excludes people. You excluded yourself from the narrative. So when people are saying, I'm not subject to those laws because I don't like supremacists and all that, a lot of times they're telling you they just have a hard time expressing to you what they actually mean. So let's help them out a little bit. Every court case, everything on earth, all the way from spiritual, religion, nation building, whatever deals with intangible property. Even the spirit and the soul that has intangible property to the body defines murder. I'll give you an example. When people walk out of a store, no matter what store it is, Home Depot, Lowe's, Walmart, whatever, and we mention Walmart a lot, but Walmart does not in any way, they don't pay for the show, so we're not advertising for Walmart. Just want to let you know. Nobody actually pays for the show. We do this voluntarily. You're going to look for your car. You walk out of a store, you're going to look for your car. Now, what defines theft? And if you take this example, you're going to see it in every other example. What defines theft is the fact that you took somebody else's car. Why is that? So we've covered this before, but I'll cover it here again. Intangible property is the right to a thing, to property. Do you have the right to that particular car? So if you go to the car that you call your car, whether you own it or not, doesn't matter. What you're saying is that you have the intangible property right to that car. You get in that car, you drive away, nobody follows you, nobody claims against you, nothing. If you get in somebody else's car, another car that you don't have the intangible property right to use, you drive out of the parking lot, you're going to have cops all over you, people yelling at you and everything else because what did you do? You stole the car. How do they know that? They know that because you didn't have the intangible property right to that car. You infringed on somebody else's intangible property right to that car. That's how you define car theft. It's in all court cases. They just don't specify it. Why? Because they're supremacists. They write things that do not engage and or address intangible property rights. So what the government of the United States,
they have them. Of course, they have them. And amongst themselves, but
they don't acknowledge them for everybody because right, why?
The
because
folk.
They're supremacists. That's why.
Exactly, for the common folk.
So everybody that was born here has an intangible property right to here, this land. Indians, African Americans, white people, Chinese, Asian, Jews, Dutch, English. If you're born here, we're going to acknowledge your intangible property right to be here. That's what this national government's all about. It deals with intangible property rights and non-supremacy. The only result from those two narratives is equality. It deals with CPS. How can a state come in and take the intangible property right to someone's child? That should be, oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say they of course can't.
Right. They can't do that. That belongs to where? The church. That's where you were married in. The churches are utterly failing in their whole mission. Because when they see a abused child, they have the right to step in, because where did you go to get married? You went to the church to get married. That's a spiritual thing. What God brings together, let no man render asunder. Let no man take away. Let no man split apart. So why is it okay for man to ignore the church in their state and take over the church? Well, it's because they're supremacists. That's why. That's why they do it. They believe that they're entitled. They have serious entitlement issues, by the way. They believe they're entitled to that, and that's okay. So you have to reason with a supremacist in a knowledgeable manner in order to get them to wake up and come out of their stupor of they're better than everybody else. And the reason why they portray that is because their self-esteem is so low that they have to create a persona of supremacy in order to feel like they matter. And they don't want to be ignored. That's all it is. It's a very low self-esteem. They were beat down by their parents. Whatever happened to them. They were kicked around in school. The whole deal. Whatever it was, it's a self-esteem problem. Look at Mark Zuckerberg. Guy got kicked around school all the time. Nobody ever respected him because he was around supremacists. He wanted to be accepted by everybody, so he believed that the supremacists were accepted by everyone, the guys that had the low self-esteem. And he believed that, so he was kicked around by them, and it made it worse. He's easily controlled by other supremacists. So if you have a strong personality, and if you have a confident personality, don't use that to be greater than everyone else. Use that to help people. It's in a righteous manner, lift them up and help them be better than you. That's what it's all about. That's what we're here for. Help them become better than you. And no matter how you do that, hopefully those people, and they'll find the strength within themselves to break down that persona that they've created, whether it's false or whatever, and come up the right way of things and how they are, not what they believe they are. Okay, so that's where we're at right now. You got to realize how things are, not how you believe they are. And I don't want to sit here and preach at you and lecture you and everything else like I'm your dad. I'm just saying that look into intangible property. Start looking at the supremacy thing. Start looking at all these things that could actually fix these problems that everyone's having. Not exacerbate them, make them larger than they have to be or that they really are in nature. Help that supremacist understand that everyone there is equal. And when they do the condescending, well, you're entitled to your beliefs, what they're actually saying is, you're stupid as hell and you don't know reality. Because why? Because they're supremacists. That's what they do. So we have to turn that around. And then you'll have what they call an advanced society. No one in this world has any more right to this world than any other one. You don't have any more right to this world, to your body, your spirit, and your soul, having the intangible property right to your body, the intangible property right to accumulate things that take care of your body, that keep your body out of the cold, out of the heat, and these things, than anyone else. You're not entitled to the law where nobody else is entitled to the law. That's a supremacist thing. It's a problem. And you're always going to cause problems because you're going to go after people that don't have an oath to anything. You're going to try to take what they have. That's stealing. So you're not really that supreme in reality, are you? You're nothing more than a common thief. That's where supremacy leads you. Okay? So let's define this. Supreme law of the land. You want to believe the supreme law of the land? The supreme law of the land is encompassed and is restricted to, in reality, to Manhattan Island and the jurisdiction of the United States, which is the District of Columbia. Okay? You really want to believe in it, and you want to fly that flag belongs in the District of Columbia and Manhattan Island and nowhere else. That's reality. But if you want to believe you're supreme, great, wonderful. Then you're going to fall. Not because somebody's going to make you fall. That's just the way that is. That's natural law. We would like to see the Native American Indians have their own nations, not put on reservations as a prison for them. That's crazy. Why do we do that? Why do the supremacists do that? All you're doing is creating resentment, ill will, non-trust. Why would you do that? Yeah, we all came from the same place, which is North Africa. So why would you treat your brother that way? Unless you think you're a supremacist and they're not your brother. If you think they're savages and beasts. Well, look at yourself. That's what supremacist is. It's a savage and a beast. That's what the whole term is. The supremacist, someone who believes they're better than everybody else, is nothing more than a savage and a beast. Got anything to add, Stu? Getting close to closing time here.
Yeah, no, I think it was some food for thought. So
okay.
I'm good.
Hopefully we have some good news for people next week. The bill did go off, by the way, when it's in the mail. And it was signed. It was published. Any suggestions we're open to, please let us know. If there's anything that people need, we can create an act or whatever to satisfy those needs. The American National Union is doing very well. Those guys are awesome, by the way. They're doing a lot of great work over there. They get a lot done. The Great Council does. And if you want to get on that call, I can't remember the number, but I believe that advertisement's out to find that number, by the way. Sorry, I just can't remember the number off the top of my head.
Yeah, I don't have it accessible right now.
That was an afterthought. I didn't plan for that thought. But anyways, okay. Thank you for listening to the T-roh Show. Please leave your comments below. Please don't forget to subscribe. We love subscribers. It's really encouraging for us to get subscribers, and that we hope that the T-roh Show has made a difference in your life, because that's why when we first came out with it, we planned on it to be a series of peeling layers from a rotten onion, and to give food for thought for people to learn as much as they possibly can, to become better than we are, everything that we do, because that is the mark of a non-supremacist. And I don't mind that mark. So thank you for listening to T-Roh Show. We'll see you next week, folks. And have a good week.
Enjoy your work week.